Okay, so the Parsha of Matan Torah begins with the pasuk B'chodesh Hashlishi L'tzeis B'nei Yisrael Meretz Mitzrayim Bayoyim Hazeh Bo Midbar Sinai. That they arrived at Midbar Sinai Bayoyim Hazeh in the third month. It's not clear why it's important to know when they arrived. What it says afterwards, Moshe Ola El HaElokim, Chazal tell us, and Rashi brings it, that it was only the day after. So in other words, the Bayoim Hazeh Bo Midbar Sinai, really nothing happened on that day. So why does the Parsha of Matan Torah begin with that day? Bayoim Hazeh, it's interesting that the time of Matan Torah doesn't appear in the Torah. Chazal figure it out based on the Bayoim Hazeh, how many days beyond the Bayoim Hazeh was Matan Torah, and there's a Machlokes Tanoim and Amoraim. But all the Torah tells us in terms of the date of Matan Torah is the Bayoim Hazeh Bo Midbar Sinai. So what is Bayoim Hazeh? Rashi says that Bayoim Hazeh is B'Rosh Chodesh. B'Rosh Chodesh. Rashi doesn't tell us how we know that Bayoim Hazeh is Rosh Chodesh. Rashi goes on to say, Loi hoyo tzorich lichtov elo Bayoim Hahu. Ma'u Bayoim Hazeh sheyiu divrei Torah chadoshim olecha ki'ilu hayoim nitnu. It's always today. Bayoim Hazeh. So this is actually a very difficult Rashi because l'chore, the Reisha and the Seifa of Rashi contradict each other. What do I mean to say? Because from where do we know what Rashi says in the Reisha that Bayoim Hazeh is Rosh Chodesh? So there's a Gemara in the Sugi of Matan Torah in Shabbos Daf Pevov that says Ksiv hocho bayoim hazeh bo midbar Sinai. The pasuk over here says bayoim hazeh bo midbar Sinai. Ksiv hosom. It says in Parshas boy hachodesh hazeh lochem roish chadoshim. Ma lahalon roish chodesh avkan roish chodesh. We make a gzeres shava bayoim hazeh from the pasuk of hachodesh hazeh lochem. And we say that Mala Halon Rosh Chodesh, Avkan Rosh Chodesh, Mikan, Sheberosh Chodesh, Bo Yisrael Midbar Sinai. And this is in the Mechilta right here. How do we know that HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem was said on Rosh Chodesh? That's because Chazal teach us that the pasuk of HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem is not only coming to tell us that HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem Rosh Chadoshim, that from here on, Nisan will be counted as the first of the 12 months, but this pasuk is actually teaching us the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. And Chazal tell us that Moshe Rabbeinu was niskashe b'moilad halavona. It wasn't clear to him what one needs to see in order to establish that the new moon was seen. And the Rebbeinu Shalom heraloi be'etzba, and he said, Kaviyochel kozeh re'ei v'kadesh. This is what you need to see. So this is what you need to see. So obviously this pasuk is being said on Rosh Chodesh, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu could be married be'etzba v'omer HaChodesh hazeh lochem Rosh Chadoshim. So we know that the pasuk of HaChodesh hazeh lochem Rosh Chadoshim was said on Rosh Chodesh, and we learn from there to here, Gzeres Shava v'hazeh hazeh, that Bayoim Hazeh Bo Midbar Sinai was on Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Nu. Oy bazoi, what does Rashi continue and say? Loi hoyo tzorich loymar, elo bayoim hahu. Why does it say bayoim hazeh? To tell me that b'chol yoim, it should be in your eyes kechadoshim. It had to say hazeh in order that we should make the gzeres shava from here to there, from there to here, and we should establish that the day that they came to Midbar Sinai was on Rosh Chodesh. Anyway, we have an arichas about this somewhere else. I'm not going to get into the details right now, but the point I want to make is that in Rashi, you obviously see that Rashi holds that these two Midrashei Chazal could work out together They could go hand in hand, and we can learn from this hazeh. We can learn from this hazeh that we're talking about the day of Rosh Chodesh, and we could also learn from this hazeh that by Yom Hazeh, that whatever day it is, it's always the Yom Hazeh. It's always today. And as we will hopefully explain, you know that nothing is a coincidence. You didn't believe, and Avada in the Torah, you know, Chazal tell us on the pasuk, "Ki loy davar reik hu mikem," that ve'im reik hu mikem hu. If somebody feels that something in the Torah is empty of meaning, it's because it reflects his own personal emptiness. Im reik hu mikem. So we know that everything in the Torah is bedikduk, as the Maharal says, dvorim gedolim einom b'mikre. So there most probably is a reason that the source for figuring out the date of Bo Midbar Sinai, figuring out that Bayoim Hazeh is Rosh Chodesh, that the source for this is from the HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem Rosh Chadoshim. Most probably it's not a coincidence, but there's a real connection between the HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem Rosh Chadoshim of Yetzias Mitzrayim and the Bayoim Hazeh Bo Midbar Sinai of Matan Torah. Now, as we said, in the pasuk of HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem, it says two things. One thing is that from here on, Chodesh Nisan is going to be counted as the first month from Yetzias Mitzrayim on. And the other thing is that we have the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh, and all the Yomim Tovim, all the dates are determined by the day in the month, in the lunar month, which is established through Kiddush HaLevana. It's logical to assume that these two things are connected. In other words, the fact that we started counting the months of the year from Nisan, and the fact that we count with the Levana and not with the Chama. In other words, it says in the Targum Yonasan ben Uziel in Malachim that until Yetzias Mitzrayim, Yidden counted the months based on the solar year. It's from Yetzias Mitzrayim on that we started counting from Chodesh Nisan on, and we started counting the Chodshei HaLevana. So what's the connection of these two things? It's also interesting that in spite of the fact that all our dates and all our moyadim are totally in the Levana, are totally in the Chodshei HaLevana, nevertheless, we have the responsibility to make sure that the time in the Chodshei HaLevana corresponds with the time in the solar year. That's the Shomor Es Chodesh HaAviv V'Asiso Pesach. That's why we have a leap year, in order to make sure that the lunar time and the solar time correspond with each other. What's the meaning of that? You know that all the Moyadim, the Gimel Regolim, have two dimensions. One is an agricultural, natural dimension, and the other is a historical dimension. In other words, we have the Chag that's related to the Aviv, the spring, the Chag HaKotzer, which is related to the harvest, and the Chag HaOsif, which is the festival of the ingathering of the produce from the fields into the home. So this is one dimension of the Gimel Regolim. But there's also another dimension. The Chag HaMatzos is a Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. The Chag HaShavuos is Matan Toraseinu. The Chag HaSukkos, which reminds us of the Besukos Shavti as Bnei Yisrael during the 40 years that we wandered in the Midbar. So you know that the agricultural time, the natural time, is cyclical. It repeats itself. It doesn't progress. As the pasuk says in Parshas Noach, Oid kol yemei haaretz. Zera v'kotzir v'kor v'choim v'yoim v'laylo lo yishboisu. So the Shana, in terms of the agricultural year, is a Shana in the sense of Shana olav hakosuv la'akev. It's a Shana in the sense of repetition. It repeats itself. Everything goes back to where it started. I mean, history repeats itself in the full sense of the word, because nature is cyclical. How does Shlomo HaMelech say in Koheles? V'zorach hashemesh uba hashemesh ve'el mekoymoi shoyeif zoyreach hu sham. The sun rises, the sun sets, and to its place, it is shoyeif, it rushes, and there it rises again. And as he continues, Hoylech el doroim v'soivev el tzofoin, soivev, hoylech haruach v'al svivoisav shav haruach. It goes towards the south, it veers towards the north. I mean, the wind goes around and around, and on its round, the wind returns. In other words, it's always going in circles like the dial on the clock. So there's really no progression. It's going back to where it came from. Every progression, every move forward is at the same time a move backwards, right? And man is also part of this story, as the pasuk says in Koheles, Hakoil hoylech el makom echad, Hakoil hoya min ha'afar, v'hakoil shov el ha'afar. All originates from dust, and all returns to the dust. So on this level, we say that, as the pasuk says in Koheles, Masha hoya, hu sheyiyeh, ve'ein kol chodosh tachas hashemesh. Nothing's new. Whatever was, will be. So that the festivals that are based on the seasons of the year, and that's something that was popular even in ancient cultures, that they celebrated the seasons of the year, but that simcha is temporary, is superficial, is short-lived, because everything returns to where it came from. There's no real progression. And we were also tied into this concept of time. This is the time of Bereshis bara Elokim, natural time, that turns like the dial on a clock, that every step forward is also a step backwards. And therefore our year also began from Tishrei, with Brias Olam. But B'shas Yetzias Mitzrayim, we were given the mitzvah rishono shenitztavu bo Yisrael. It all begins with this mitzvah of Achodesh Hazeh Lochem, where we actually started. We were given a different sense of time, a different perspective on time, a time that's based on happenings, a time that we count from Geulas Mitzrayim. And this is a linear time. It's a time that progresses based on human bechira. B'schus shloisho dvarim nigalu aveiseinu mi Mitzrayim. In other words, Yetzias Mitzrayim reflects bechira. And in spite of the fact that in nature, everything returns to where it came from, that's history in the sense of his story, which is the story of nature, the story of Bereshis bara Elokim. But in terms of Bechira, life is really a mystery, because Harishus Nesuna, therefore my story is a mystery, and therefore I have the ability to affect change. So it's not that Masha Hoya, Hu Sheyiyeh. No, it could be that Yiyeh, what never was, because I can ascend to a new level. And that's the idea of the linear time that begins with Yetzias Mitzrayim. The truth of the matter is that counting according to the lunar year is bechlal arbitrary, because there's no such a thing as months. I mean, there is such a thing as months, but do the months come to an end after 12? I mean, you could, by the same token, we could count 15 months, we could count 10 months. I mean, the sun revolves, or the world revolves around the sun. I mean, on a yearly basis, whereas making a year out of the Levana is really something that's a matter of choice. And that's the part of the idea of Achoidish Hazeh Lochem. To the extent Chazal say in the Yerushalmi that Bezdin was Mekadosh the Chodesh, it actually affects nature. But even without getting to that level, on the very simple level, I mean, the Shnas HaLavona is time that man chooses to make the 12 months of the Sivuv of the Lavona into a year. So the Shnas HaLavona, which is our year, our time, HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem, is what we begin with counting from Yetzias Mitzrayim, not from the time of creation, which is Tishrei b'Tishrei Nivra Ha'olam, but we're not counting nature now. Our count now is based on what happened, and what happens through human choice and the Rebbeinu Shalom's response to human choice. Rashi brings on the pasuk of Ein Kol Chodosh Tachas HaShemesh. Rashi brings in the name of Chazal that Tachas really means instead of. There's nothing new instead of. Chalifei HaShemesh. And Shemesh represents Torah. And there's nothing new outside of Torah, says Rashi. B'chol mashu loimed b'davar shu chalifei hashemesh ein boi chidush. Lo yireh ela mashu hoyo kvar. Aval hahoyge b'Torah, he's shayach to chidush. So in other words, if somebody is a hoyge b'Torah and he commits to a life of uvacharto b'chaim, he can actually experience chidush. His life is not a cycle of going back to where he came from and going back to where he came from and going in circles. The pasuk says in Tillim, it's a shvera pasuk, but I'm teaching it b'derech drush. Saviv rishoyim yishalochun. Rishoyim are always going saviv because there's no real progress. There's no real progress when somebody is living a life that's governed by the rules of nature. So since nature is cyclical, his life is. And therefore it's Saviv Rishoim Yishalochun. Whereas Chalifei Hashem, whereas when somebody lives a life of Shemesh, then it's Yesh Chodosh. Then we don't say that Masha Hoyo Hu Sheyiyeh. You know, Reb Yehuda Halevi writes in a poem that Avdei Hazman Avdei Avodim Heim. The slaves of time are the slaves of slaves. Or that the quintessential slaves. Eved Hashem, hu levadei chofshi. The Eved Hashem, he himself is a free man. What is this expression, Avdei Hazman? The slaves of time? You know that we say really es hashemesh lememshelas bayoim, v'sayoreach v'koichovim lememshelas balayla. Time is based on the shemesh and the yoreach, and they are really moishlim bekerev tevel. Ordinarily, a person is actually avdei hazman. He's governed by the cycle of time, and if so, avdei hazman, avdei avodim heim. And the pshat is like this, because, you know, just like one can be enslaved by somebody else, he could be enslaved by himself. What do I mean to say by himself? In other words, if I'm enslaved by myself of yesterday, if I can't take off and become something new today because I'm bogged down by who I was yesterday, so then I am Avdei Hazman. I'm enslaved by myself. I could become a slave of myself. And only a person that is mischadish, Only a person that taps into the higher dimension of time, Avdei Hashem, Hu Levadei Chofshi, can rise above being enslaved by time. So the mitzvah Rishoina Shenitztavu by Yisrael is really shaykh to the Geula Me'avdus Lecherus, which is the Parsha of Geulas Mitzrayim, is the Parsha of HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem. And that's not by chance. It's because HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem is rising above the Avdus Hazman, having the ability to be Mischadesh. And that is Geula, because Geula is rising above the Avdus Hazman. And from that Geula, we go into the Usfartem Lochem, that we define time. And we reached Matan Torah, which is B'chodesh Ashlishi B'yoyim Hazeh, Rosh Chodesh. And that's the most important date in the context of Matan Torah. And because Rosh Chodesh is the mitzvah Rishoina, and that's really the essence. The essence of Torah is Rosh Chodesh. As Rashi continues, that Kol Yoim V'yoim Yiu Beinecha Kechadoshim. Kol Yoim V'yoim Yiu Beinecha Kechadoshim Kilu Hayoim Nitnu. In other words, because it's not only on Rosh Chodesh, it's every day that a person can rise above time. That's the message of Rosh Chodesh. So the important message is that we remember that, you know, it's not so much about yesterday or tomorrow. It's actually about what's between yesterday and tomorrow. That's what makes all the difference. That's what makes all the difference. And it's true that Hakoil Bomin Ha'afar, Hakoil Shovel Ha'afar, it's true that everything originates from dust and will return to dust. But as the pasuk goes on to say, that the Ruach Ha'odom Ha'oila Hi Lema'ala, that the human spirit rises above. In other words, we do have, as a bus of Adam, with the physical body, which is Hoivev and Nifsad, I mean, we take this hand that's going to be buried in the grave, and we put film on this hand, and with that, we make a connection with eternity. So it's not Hakoil Bomina Offer, Hakoil Shovel Offer, but we actually have the ability to move forward and to move higher and to move upwards. Yeah, and that's really the Chazal tell us, Chorus al haluchos, al tikri chorus, elo cherus. And to the extent of cherus, mi malach hamoves. Because what's the malach hamoves? The malach hamoves is not only on the day that I drop dead. The malach hamoves is kill time. The malach hamoves is the biggest time killer. And when a person doesn't understand that the chshivus of time, yeah, he's under the shilton of the malach hamoves, because his time is the time of hakoil ba mina offer v'hakoil shovel offer. So Matan Torah didn't just change the face of history, but it actually redefined what history is. History is not a history that repeats itself, but history is a mystery that depends on my choice, and it's my choice. You know, it's im ein anili mili. There were 600,000 Jews by Matan Torah, but every Jew has to believe that im ein anili mili ukshani la'atzmi moani ve'im lo yachshav emesai, as they say, v'hoyu advarim ha'ela asher anochi mitzavecho, that a person has to see it as a personal tzivui, commandment that was given to him in particular, asher anochi mitzavecho, and that it's hayoim, it's today, not yesterday or tomorrow, it's hayoim, and it's hadvarim ha'ela, and this is it. I mean, it's not anything else. It's hadvarim ha'ela, and it's asher anochi mitzavecho, and that it's hayoim. And you know, that's why when we do Kiddush Levana, we say Ateres, the Levana, Yisrael, Moinim la Levana, Ateres Teferes Lamusei Botem, Shehei Masidim Leheschadesh Kemoiso, Ulefore leyotzrom al shem kvoid malchusoi. So who wants to translate that thing into English? Mistama, not me, but the thing is, Rabbi Green, you want to offer your services? Ateres tiferes la amusei botem. Amusei botem is Klal Yisrael. Ha'amusim mini botem. But it's Ateres tiferes. It's a crowning glory.
I need to make sure that I have the right translator, though. But yeah.
You mean they're not only one translation? Okay, so Ateres tiferes la amusei botem. Shehem asidim. Klal Yisrael will renew themselves like the moon. And the Avud Ram says that's in Tchias HaMesim. That's in Tchias HaMesim. So you see that Chidush HaLavana symbolizes that Chidush. You know that we have a minig that by Kiddush Lavana, we say 3 times Shalom Aleichem. The original minig really is V'omer L'chaveiroi. Not that you should say to 3 people. You say to 1 person. V'omer L'chaveiroi Gimel Pa'amin. Say Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem. What's the idea? So first of all, you see, since Chidush HaLavana is tapping into Tchias HaMesim, which is really, as we Rishonim say in the Pirshat Tefillah in the first bracha, that Mechayim Mesim is a daily thing. So since in Kiddush Lavana we're tapping into the idea of Tchias HaMesim, so even though I've been with you for the last year and I saw you just a minute before, I say to you, Shalom Aleichem, because it's all new. It's all new. And not only once do I say, because Tchias HaMesim really, it says, Mechaye Mesim Berachamim Rabim, we say in davening. We also say the bracha that's said in a cemetery, we say, Osid Lahachyoischem Bedin. And in Yigdal, we say, Mesim Yechaya Kel Beroiv Chazdoi. So you see that Tchias HaMesim is on the 3 dimensions of Tchias HaMesim. It's Chesed, Din, and Rachamim. And therefore we say, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem. Yeah, so the pshat is that I see you in a totally new way, on 3 levels, in 3 dimensions, in 3 different ways. In any case, the Yom Tov of Shavuos, which comes behemshich to Hachodesh Hazeh Lochem Rosh Chadoshim, and comes behemshich to the Usfaratem Lochem, and comes behemshich to the Bayoim Hazeh Bo Midbar Sinai, is a time really to renew our connection with Torah. And remember, like Rav Yosef said, that if it wasn't for this day, Ilav HaYoim Edikagorim Kamo Yosef Ike B'Shukin. How many Yosefs would there be? Meaning, it's not just that the Torah changed the course of human history, but it changed me. And so it's about taking it personally, taking the idea of Torah and renewing ourselves personally and renewing our connection. And the Eibishter zal helfen that we should be zeiche to have an ongoing, real connection with Torah. And if anybody wants to argue or say anything, so no, I'm not against or say a good Yom Tov. Now I see Taka that Avshustel is though when and Mordechai and Chanina. So that's an office or the house?
It's the office.
It's the office. It looks like if big board meetings.
Not big.
Be'ez Hashem. No, Be'ez Hashem. But you should have a big board, but you shouldn't listen to them. Okay, no, is Kumtais Azoy. Was noch? Yeshua Duke, is a guten Yom Tov. No, and So that's basically is the story on Shine. I wish you a gute Nacht.